Hi, everyone. It's Mr. Rosas with United to Learn, bringing you another installment of our mindfulness and SEL video series. The topic of today's video is self-talk. How do you talk to yourself under stress? Now, let's read this quote together. Your body hears everything your mind says. Now, whether you're watching this alone, with friends or family, I invite you to pause the video now, read the quote again, and just see what this means to you in this specific moment in time. At the end of the video, I welcome you to return to this quote, read it, and see if your relationship to it has changed. Now, this following exercise is optional. If you feel comfortable doing it, we're going to be thinking about times in our life that have been a little stressful. So if you're comfortable doing it, great. If not, don't worry, just sit through it and we'll continue the video. You might want to skip forward a little, up to you. But I want you to stop and think of a time when you made a mistake, you failed an assignment, or something didn't go like you planned. Doesn't have to be anything super deep or catastrophic, just maybe you dropped your food in front of everybody in the cafeteria, or you tripped in front of a stranger, or you got a 60 when you thought you were going to get an 80 or a 90 on the test. Just stop and think about it. Where were you? Maybe what were you wearing? How were you feeling? And then I want you to think, what were you telling yourself? What words were you using towards yourself to get you through that situation? How did you talk to yourself? Again, I invite you to pause the video to sort of meditate a little bit more if you need to. And I invite you to share those experiences with your loved ones and share what were you telling yourself in that moment and time. Now, I can personally say that a lot of the times when I look back and do this exercise, I've noticed that I had what's called negative self-talk, where I criticized myself, right? We have this wonderful ability to talk to ourselves when we're doing something, right? Sort of guide yourself, and it could be this internal dialogue, it can be something constructive and positive. But when things go wrong, it could automatically kick into what's called negative self-talk. But why? And here's some theories about that. Now, our brain is wired to grab onto negative thoughts. That's called the negative bias. And for millennia, the negative bias has helped us survive. Think about when we were, thousands of years ago, out in the wilderness, hunting for food. There were bigger predators than us. And so our brain remembered all the stressful, negative things that happen out there in the woods or the desert or the prairies. Oh, this is where a tiger lives. I need to be really careful, so that you could plan ahead and, you wouldn't make mistakes that would get you eaten by a predator. The thing is that we don't live in those times anymore for the most part. We are going to school, going to work, driving, being at home, but our brain still works like it did thousands of years ago. It still wants to watch out for those negative things, and it goes into the negative bias. Now, negative self-talk is normal in a way. It can help us, but it could be reinforced or strengthened by conditioning. And conditioning is the way that we grew up. The words and the narratives and the stories that we hear about ourselves and others, and it starts with our family. Could be what you hear from your parents or your grandparents or caretakers, but it expands way more than that. When you turn on the TV and watch shows or commercials, what information or narratives do you hear in those commercials, in the songs that you hear, in the movies that you watch? And conditioning changes family to family, region to region, country to country, and it also changes based on social economical status. So it's a very complex thing, something that we don't have control over 100%. And now, when this negative self-talk does happen, it triggers the production of neurotransmitters and stress hormones such as cortisol that are usually present when we're in danger. Now, these brain chemicals and body hormones called the stress hormones, they activate when we perceive danger. They prepare our body to either fight, fly or run away, or freeze. They are helpful, right? We do need them if in case we are in 100% danger. The thing is that too much of these hormones, such as cortisol, could shrink our prefrontal cortex over time. And if you remember in our past videos, we discussed that the prefrontal cortex is very important. That's how we analyze things. That's how we pick up information, and we decide, we make good decisions with that information. And I think importantly also, it helps us be kind to others, compassionate to others, and ultimately to ourselves. And also these neurotransmitters and stress hormones create unpleasant physical sensations, the tightening of the throat, the funny feeling in your belly, the warmth on your cheeks, the flushing, right? And if we do this a lot, if we are in a habit of having negative self-talk, we can get stuck in a cycle of negativity that stops us from moving forward. Like, I make a mistake, I start saying negative things towards myself, which trigger all these neurotransmitters and stress hormones, which then make my body feel icky. Then I want to escape my body by going to my mind, but then I kick back to negative self-talk, and it's just a never-ending cycle, right? So what can we do, not necessarily to counter or make negative self-talk disappear, but to create a space for it so it doesn't feel so hurtful and it doesn't control our lives? And the answer to that question is reassure yourself instead. Now, it doesn't mean that if maybe in the cafeteria somebody didn't want to sit with me, my negative self-talk kicks in and say, oh, I'm a loser, they don't like me. I'm not going to say the opposite. I'm not going to say, well, I'm better than them, that's why they don't want to sit with me. No, we're going to use words that are going to comfort us and get us through that difficult situation without pretending like it's not happening, right? So how can we reassure ourselves? And these are just three little strategies that I personally use. So whenever you are in that moment of suffering, where you just feel ugh about yourself, you could stop and you can ask yourself, how would I talk to a loved one or a friend if they were going through the same thing I'm going through right now? And I bet you wouldn't say those things that you're telling yourself. You wouldn't say, oh, you blew it, you're such a loser, that's why nobody likes you. You wouldn't tell that to a friend, right? Or a brother or your mom or your cousin or your grandma, right? So why are you telling yourself those things then? Another thing you could do is think of someone that you hold heartily trust or that you love. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could even be a fictional character from a book that you really love. They could be here with us, or they maybe moved on, transitioned. But just think of them and ask yourself, if I were in front of them and I told them what's happening now, what would they tell me? And another thing you can also sort of think about is ask yourself, if you can't think of somebody like that in your life, and that, because when you're stressed, you can't think rationally. Sometimes it's hard to access those memories. So when you just are in the last resort and you don't know who to reach, then ask yourself, what words in this moment would make me feel comforted? And those are reassurances, right? Those are the kind words like, baby, it's gonna be okay. I love you. You'll be fine. You've got this. You got people that love you. Those are the words that we usually offer our friends or family when they're suffering, right? But it's hard for us to direct them to ourselves. So these three tips could help you sort of dig those reassurances out when you are stressed. And once you have them out, the key is that you have to offer those kind words to yourself. Okay? Now, in the beginning, it's going to feel a little bit disingenuous, like, I don't believe this. But just keep trying it. Remember that your brain can change, that neuroplasticity. The more that we repeat something, the more connections that your brain's going to make, and it's going to become easier for you. So how can you get started? First and foremost is noticing it, noticing the self-talk when it arises. And one of the best things that you could do is to write it down. Now, for the next week or two, write down or be mindful of your self-talk. Whenever something comes up, whether it's positive or negative, and you notice that there's this little dialogue, this little voice telling you something, if you have a chance in a notebook or in your phone, write down what that inner dialogue is telling you. And then after a week or two, go over it. How does that make you feel? Right? If it's just a bunch of negative self-talk and you don't feel good about it, just know that we can kind of shift that negative self-talk with reassurances. Now, if you're in this, in the moment where you're busy and you don't have time to pull out your notebook or your phone, you can just simply pause, say to yourself, here, I have some self-talk going on. What is it? And just note it without judging it, without saying, oh, this voice is mean. Just notice it, okay? And once you become acquainted or more familiar with your self-talk, and if you notice there's a lot of negative self-talk, then you can pause, accept that there's some negative self-talk, but then bringing those reassurances. Now, this is, I think, a good activity to do with your friends or family, where you can sit and maybe create a poster or on a note card or a Post-it, like a list of reassuring phrases. Like, I love you, you are protected, you deserve to be happy, this happens, you'll succeed, you'll come out successful, so that you have a list you can go to whenever you do need a reassurance. So I hope this video helped. This connects to mindfulness, being aware of yourself, getting to know yourself better, and offering yourself kindness, mindful attention to yourself, so that you can navigate through stressful situations. So I hope this video helped. I invite you to go back to the quote, read it, and see if your perception of it has changed. Until next time, bye.